So a very good morning from London to all the speakers and participants in today's webinar. Apology for the slight delay. My name is Riandu Sembiring. I am the political counselor. My name is Riandu Sembiring. I'm the political counselor at the Indonesian Embassy here in London. I have the pleasure to be your moderator today, and I would like to welcome everyone to our event. It is an honor for the Indonesian Embassy to host this event, which we call Seafarers Talk, Repatriation and International Cooperation during COVID-19 pandemic. And just to let everyone in on the background and context of our event, during the past several months or so, the Embassy has been extensively engaged in efforts working together with other stakeholders to repatriate Indonesian seafarers back home. And as the pandemic continues, we believe that experiences accumulated during this time by all the stakeholders would be crucial, and there is merit in having an exchange of these best practices, exchange of ideas, views, and lessons learned on how we can improve protection for seafarers who are crucial in today's trade, even more so during the pandemic. Today, in our midst, we have a list of speakers. We have tried to have a good mix of speakers from governments and international organizations, which is crucial to the topic today, that is international cooperation in the context of seafarers repatriation. And without further ado, I would like now to briefly introduce and invite the first speaker. We have Mr. Adam Mulawaraman Tugio. He's the Charge d'Affaires of the Indonesian Embassy, my boss. Mr. Adam would briefly share his views and perspectives relevant to the topic. Now, a bit of housekeeping. We have today a total of 6 speakers. So, with the indulgence of all speakers, I would try to limit all the speakers to a maximum of 10 minutes. Of course, there will be a flexibility depending on the discussion that we have, but each speaker, if possible, please do not exceed a time limit of 10 minutes, so we could wrap up all the speakers in 1 hour. Then afterwards, we could have a question and answers for 20 or 30 minutes, depending on the questions that we will receive. And hopefully we will wrap everything up by 12:30. So we will have a good 19 minutes or so for our discussion today. So as the first speaker, I would like now to give the floor to Pak Adam. Pak Adam, the floor is yours. Please, Pak Wai.
Well, thank you very much, Ando, for the introductions, and good morning to distinguished participants from London, and good afternoon for participants in Jakarta. I understand that several officials from Jakarta are also joining us in today's discussions. And also good morning to friends in Europe, because I understand also some of our colleagues from the Europe participants are coming from the Europe also. I would like, on behalf of the embassies of Indonesia in London, to express our gratitude to all of the participants, especially to the panelists who are participating in today's discussions. It is certainly an honor for me to be among you on this webinar to share the Indonesia's embassy experience and perspective relating to the issues of repatriations and international cooperations during the COVID-19 pandemic. Before I continue, I would like to extend my gratitude certainly to the UK government, the IMO, and the ITF for their continued support to the Indonesian Embassy in London, especially in our effort to repatriate Indonesian seafarer. I have to say that without their support and cooperation, their support and cooperation have been one of the very fundamental in making our repatriations effort success. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I think the COVID COVID-19 pandemic has exposed to the world to an unprecedented challenge. It is not only in the health sector, but also in the social economic aspect of the global affairs. The COVID certainly disrupted global trade and supply chains. And I think in this regard, the seafarers played very important roles in ensuring the flows of goods, the flows of logistics throughout the world in the situations of the COVID-19 epidemic. In this regards, I think the unique and essential roles of the seafarer has been recognized and has been highlighted by the IMO Secretary General in Day of Seafarer message a couple of months ago. Seafarers are key workers on the front line that deserve our thanks. And in times when they face difficulties in terms of repatriations or crew changes, I think it is obligation for us, the government, international organizations, and all stakeholders to work together to support them. I think this one of the messages arising from the recent International Maritime Summit on crew changes, which was organized by the UK government and also attended by several countries, whom some of the representatives are attending this dialogue, including Indonesia. We encourage all the IMO states, therefore, to designate seafarers as a key worker and consequently providing them essential services that allow them to have a crew changes in safely a manner to allow the flows of goods, the flow of logistics could continue during this pandemic. For Indonesian, the protections of Indonesian civilian abroad always been one of the main duties and responsibility. And in this regard, the Ministers of Foreign Affairs has designated the protections of Indonesian citizens, as well as the international cooperations to this end as two priorities areas of the Indonesian diplomacies during the pandemic. I think our experience in dealing with this issue, I think there are two cases which, to my knowledge, and I think as the embassies today has facilitated around 24 repatriation cases involving around 1,200 seafarers. I think we would like to highlight two cases which we think is very important to be shared to others. First, on the cruise vessels, one of the case involving one of the big management cruise services, the global cruise lines management, whereby with the facilitations of the IMO, the ITF, and the assistance of the host country, the UK, port controls authorities, we managed to establish a line of communications with the management and relevant stakeholders, leading to a successful repatriations around 350 seafarers. We are still working to repatriate remaining 100 seafarers, and we are closely monitoring their well-being as well as developments of the company. In our perspective, the case has set an example, one of the best practices of cooperations among member states, in particular to implement maritime labor conventions, which involve state-state, port states, countries of nationality, as well as the IMO, ILO, and the ITF. The second case involving the fishing vessel. This is rather difficult to our understandings because of unlike the cruise lines where management is very easy to be reached and to have discussions with, the case involving the fishing vessels are more complicated, and in various cases is involved abusive cases of abusive treatment. For instance, also the seafarers has been on board for more than half of the years, so it's create, difficulties, morals and also the psychological effects also to the seafarer. I think those two cases underscores two important factor if you want to succeed in the repatriation case. First, it is mandatory to have a good international cooperations, both bilaterally and multilaterally involving relevant international organizations or alike. The implementations of commitment of the member states and compliance with international instruments, in particular MLC 2006, it becomes very important. And the second aspect is the effective port-state controls. We learn from the working together with Madam Kate White, who will also give some presentations in today's discussions. I think it would complement what we have done in ensuring the process of repatriations of Indonesian seafarer. Despite our positive experience in the UK, I believe we could learn also from other panelists today what is the important practice or what aspect that need to be taken into considerations in dealings with cases involving seafarer. The challenges we face in repatriating of this seafarer, especially in the pandemic of COVID-19, it's become, the challenge will be double because of restrictions on the air flight. For instance, there are some restrictions on, selecting the travel to allow them to repatriate, to go back home. So I think in this regard, facilitating crew changes also become one of the important elements. And I believe this is also one of the messages during which was raised and also achieved during the last summit in London, whereby all states are encouraged to facilitate the crew changes of seafarer. And in closing, let me once again, let me in the closings to underline the necessity to have a guidance on the practical measures in implementing the MLC. In particular, in case of abandonment seafarer, Indonesia together with Philippines have submitted the guidelines draft at the IMO, as we believe that the guideline would be helpful for the industries and the seafaring community in ensuring protection for the seafarer. I therefore hope that today's webinar could also hear insight on how we can improve the protections of seafarer through norm making at relevant organizations such as the IMO. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Pak Adam. I think what Pak Adam has shared was a good start to our discussion today, where he described how the COVID-19 pandemic, which is still ongoing, has affected the global flow of goods and services, and including seafarers who are key workers in the global trade via sea, and how countries can work together with international organizations and other stakeholders in tackling this challenge. For the next speaker, I would like to invite Ms. Katie Ware, who is the UK permanent representative to the International Maritime Organization and also Director of Maritime Safety and Standards at the Department of Transport. Now I give the floor to Ms. Katie Ware. Please go ahead. You have the floor.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Good morning, everybody, and a huge thanks to our distinguished colleagues from the Indonesian Embassy for giving me the opportunity to talk today. I'm really grateful to the kind words that you've spoken about the UK and our efforts, but I would also just like to really recognise the incredible due diligence that our colleagues from Indonesia and the very active approach that they've taken in respect of repatriating their seafarers. We've been deeply impressed here in the UK with your efforts and your diligence in that area. I will touch on the two cases that's been referred to, but I would just start by saying that, the UK was one of the first to recognise seafarers as key workers, and very early on, it was essential that myself and my teams, the MCA, the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency, who's responsible for the UK flag and port state in the UK, we worked very closely with the ports and the port health authorities to make sure that seafarers from the beginning would have access to medical treatment ashore, and that would all be facilitated. So we were really concerned about all of that. I would also just say that we've had a large amount of cruise ships here on the south coast, of which the operators, the majority of which I have to say, have really worked tirelessly to repatriate tens of thousands of crew. It's been a real phenomenal effort, and the UK government has also independently, here in the UK, we've repatriated just over 7,000 seafarers. The COVID pandemic has obviously exposed seafarers and what they're exposed to, and it's a very difficult time for the seafarers. When the COVID outbreak broke in the UK, we went into lockdown. The UK had to stop doing service inspections. We were actively not going on board the ships, and the reason for that was twofold. We were in lockdown. I had to protect my own staff, but also we didn't want to expose seafarers to potential COVID. In the case of the global cruise line vessels, that was quite a different case. So we were aware in May of a potential suicide on the Vasco da Gama. And at that time, we discussed it internally, and we decided that because we knew the ship was COVID-free, that we wouldn't attend the vessel. We flagged the issues with the vessel's flag and asked them to look into it. As time moved on, we were hearing more and more from the welfare in Tilbury and over in Bristol with respect to what was going on these vessels. And this culminated in the IMO calling us to a meeting. We listened very hard at that meeting, and the concerns that we had were compounded. So we were left with no choice other than to attend those vessels. So we attended the vessels, and 5 of the 6 vessels were detained. And those vessels were detained on the grounds of MLC. So the main issues were expired seafarers' employment agreements, failure of payment, and our biggest concern was the real lack of any efforts to be made to repatriate the crew. We are still working with those vessels. Some of the vessels were detained by the Admiralty Marshal, which meant that 3 of the vessels were detained by the Admiralty Marshal, which then means that the Admiralty Marshal is responsible in the UK for the welfare of those crews. We also then, in parallel, for the other 3 ships, worked very closely with the Indonesian Embassy and also the flags of the vessel through their P&I, because then, of course, when the companies went into bankruptcy, the P&I cover for repatriation kicked in. So ultimately, it was the P&I clubs who were then left to organise crew repatriations. We are very pleased with how it's going. The vessels are now down to minimum safe manning levels, and the majority of crew have returned home. There was some criticism of, well, why detain vessels that aren't going to go anywhere? They're tied up alongside, they're not operating. The bottom line is that as a result of the detention, those companies then had to act, and as a result of those detentions, the repatriations have kicked in. So we were criticised, but we were also praised. But we don't doubt what we did. We don't question what we did. We didn't set out to make a statement. We set out to do what was right. And as far as the UK is concerned, when it comes to seafarers, the seafarers are non-negotiable, and MLC is non-negotiable. But I would also highlight the case of the fishing vessels, which in some respects is a bigger concern for us in the UK. And so we haven't just detained vessels from port state, from flagged vessels. We have actually detained our own vessels for exactly the same issues. And colleagues have alluded to the fishing vessel that we detained in Scotland for exactly the same reasons and the grounds that we detained the cruise ships. But what does give us concern on the fishing vessels, particularly the larger fishing vessels, is the issue of modern day slavery, the abuse, the bullying, the harassment, the intimidation that goes with all of the other issues, such as non-payment of wages, expired contracts, no contact with home. So these are really big, important issues. What would I say? Well, in the UK, as I said, we've been in lockdown for port state control. We've only attended vessels. We will be starting to do port state control, its full regime, in the next couple of weeks. So we will be out and about. We do expect that we will find a number more of these cases of expired contracts, and we will obviously work with the necessary companies and embassies to deal with that. And I think one of the biggest lessons that we've learned is what is crucial is having that open dialogue with being able to have an open, honest dialogue with our colleagues in the embassies of the different nationalities. And that really was a shining example with our colleagues from the Indonesian Embassy. The other point I would leave on and hand back is that, as I've said, we're not just a port state, we're a flag state. We have vessels, we've got multiple vessels all over the world. We've got a large number of cruise ships laid up in Asia. We're increasingly finding it difficult for those crew changes, even getting stores on board, which is starting to concern us. But as a flag state, we are going to have to start making some really difficult decisions. If countries will not facilitate repatriation as a flag state, we are going to have to make some difficult decisions about not extending seafarers' employment agreements anymore. And that will have a huge impact. And ultimately, whilst the seafarers are our ultimate priority, if these ships will start to stop and the food chains will start to stop. So really just a key message along off the back of our summit is we really do need your help to repatriate the crews, because as a flag state, we are not going to be able to extend SEAs any longer. We must look after the welfare of our crews. And we really hope that we can work with all of you and the IMO to really make this start happening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Ware, for your perspective from the UK. I think among others, you touched upon a very important aspect. You mentioned about the accident on one of the crews of the Vasco da Gama. It shows that this pandemic is not only causing economic hardship, but could also affect the seafarers on a very personal level. And that's why international cooperation between states and also international organizations is crucial. And we also heard about the message coming out of the summit and how we could further improve this cooperation. I would like now to invite our next speaker, who is Director Judah Nugraha. He is the Director for the Protection of Citizens and Legal Entities of Indonesian Citizens and Legal Entities Overseas. Without further ado, I now would like to give the floor to him. Pak Judah, you have the floor, and you also you will act as the host. So please, Pak.
Thank you, Mr. Ando. Mr. Adam Tugio, Charge d'Affaires of Indonesian Embassy in London, distinguished panelists and participants. It is indeed a great pleasure for me to be able to join this webinar, repatriation during the COVID-19. I think it is timely for us to discuss this issue because I believe there is no country who are ready 100% to cope with this COVID-19 pandemic, especially when we are talking about how to repatriate hundreds of seafarers back home. So I would like also to give my appreciation to Indonesian Embassy in London for convening this webinar. In this opportunity, I would like to present Indonesian experience when we are trying to repatriate our Indonesian seafarer back home. And we hope also we can learn from other countries' experience in this discussion. Let me share some presentation. Can monitor? You can see the presentation, Mr. Ando?
Yes, Mr. Yuda. Yeah, Pak Yuda.
Okay. So let me start my presentation. There are some point that I would like to highlight during my presentation about statistics and about practices, what we have done during the repatriation process, the challenges and opportunity we face, and then finally lesson learned. So when we are doing the repatriation of Indonesian seafarers overseas, first when we realize maybe around during around February 2020, when we realized that the COVID-19 affected our Indonesian seafarer globally, and they need to be repatriated to Indonesia as soon as possible. At that time, we look for the database. And unfortunately, at that time, we don't have a ready database at the time. So we asked our Indonesian mission overseas. We also contacted principal, the owner, cruise companies, as well as the manning agency Indonesia to collect the data. And based on our effort, we collect around 26,000 Indonesian seafarer overseas, working mainly in cruise ship. Of course, the actual number may be higher, but this is the database, the best available data that we got. So up until now, 25th August 2007, among the 26,000, we been able to repatriate more than 25,000. So less than 1,000 more need to be repatriated to Indonesia. The location is distributed in 38 countries, including international waters. And the top 3 cruise companies where Indonesian seafarer working are Carnival Corp, around 12,000, Royal Caribbean Cruise Line, 7,000, more than 7,000, and MSC Group, 1,800. So we are talking about the infected cases regarding the COVID-19. Up until now, there are 185 Indonesian seafarer connect that get infected by the COVID-19, whereas there are 6 dead cases. 152 have been able to recover and got negative result of a PCR test, and 27 still under medical treatment. With regard to the method of evacuation or return, according to our regulation, law number 37, year 1999, regarding the international relation, Indonesian international relation, there are two types of evacuation of repatriation. First, evacuation, whereas there is an imminent life-threatening situation faced by our Indonesian national. So in this case, when there is imminent life-threatening situation, this is the responsibility of the state, the responsibility of Indonesian government to evacuate them as soon as possible to Indonesia. And the cost will be borne by Indonesian government. For this case of evacuation during COVID-19, we have done the evacuation operation 2 times. First in Wuhan, the first epicentrum of the COVID-19. And with regard to the seafarer, we have been able to evacuate 78 Indonesian seafarer working in Diamond Princess in Yokohama at that time. The second return is repatriation. We call it voluntary repatriation. The reason for the repatriation is with regard to the expiration of contract, termination of contract for justified reason, and seafarer no longer be able to carry out his duty or cannot be expected to carry them out in the circumstances. So during the COVID-19, we have been informed by the companies, especially the cruise line, that they will shut down the operation and they need to repatriate Indonesian crew to Indonesia and as soon as possible. So in this case, the resource, the cost will be borne by the ship owner or the appointed agent. For example, we have been repatriated from the cruise line of Voyager, Spectrum, Ovation, and Azam. I would like to focus on repatriation compared to the evacuation. With regard to the repatriation, first, there are principle of health protocol. We do understand that first, it is our responsibility to protect our national abroad. But at the same time, we also have to ensure that all health protocol has been fulfilled. This is to ensure there is no imported cases in Indonesia, because domestically in Indonesia, we also have quite higher COVID-19 case in Indonesia. And then second, contextual liability. We would like to ensure that the companies, the principal, the owner of the cruise line are responsible to repatriate our Indonesian seafarer back home to Indonesia. And then the national capacity. This is quite delicate because yes, we have a responsibility to protect our Indonesian national overseas, but at the same time, we also face domestic case of COVID-19. So the challenge is how to manage between the two. In this regard, we have to ensure that our national capacity are ready to receive the repatriation. So in this case, we need to ensure to minimize the case of imported cases. The fourth principle is state obligation. In this regard, port state, flag state, and state of origin must do the obligation according to international law. With regard to the term of repatriation, we divide the repatriation process into two clusters. First cluster is vessel with COVID cases, and the second cluster is vessel with no COVID cases. So we set up this term for repatriation, learning from our experience when dealing with our seafarer in Diamond Princess in Yokohama at that time. As we are aware, on board Diamond Princess at that time, hundreds of passengers and also crew got infected by the COVID-19. So we would like to ensure that all Indonesian seafarers are protected and the company have do some preventive measure to ensure the protection for our Indonesian seafarer, and also when arranging the repatriation to Indonesia. So basically, with the two clusters, the difference is about the compulsory of self-quarantine. With regard to the vessel with COVID cases, we ask the company to do compulsory self-quarantine in the vessel or other facilities, one seafarer in one room. This is to prevent the spread of COVID-19 on board the ship. And also we ask the company to do the PCR test prior to repatriation. This is to ensure that we only repatriate the health with the Indonesian seafarer is in good health. And then upon arrival in Indonesia, we do again the PCR test just to ensure there's no imported cases. And if the result of PCR test is positive, then they need medical treatment. We will liaise the Indonesian seafarer to the appointed hospital in Indonesia. And the logistic, all logistic and arrangement, including the transportation from port of entry in Indonesia to their village in Indonesia, we cooperate with the ship agency in Indonesia. And one note, for this term for repatriation, we ask the company, the ship owner, to issue a letter of guarantee to cover all expenses in relation to the implementation of national health protocol. This includes about the quarantine process and the medical treatment for the case of positive PCR, and also the repatriation to their village. Now about the challenges, ship owner. The challenges we face according to our experience when doing the repatriation, is about the in compliance with national health protocol. We do understand that this is because of the burden of cost. The company tried to repatriate our Indonesian seafarer to Indonesia as soon as possible. But at the same time, we also, in Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Indonesia, have to ensure that all line ministry, and also local government ready to receive the Indonesian seafarer. So this is one of the challenges, how to balance between the interest of ship owner to return Indonesian seafarer to Indonesia as soon as possible. But at the same time, we also ensure that all ministry, all local government ready to receive them. And in this case, we try to manage to minimize the imported cases. And then the port state, of course, we hope that the port state facilitate the repatriation process. In some cases, we find some difficulties because some port state refuse to be the transit point for our repatriation. Of course, in terms of effectiveness, the repatriation process will be more effective if we do by air. So we hope that at the time, the port state will facilitate the sign off of the seafarer and then facilitate the repatriation through air, through flight. But at the time, some port states refuse their country to be used as a transit point. Now about another challenges about regional government. It is quite challenging for central government in Jakarta to decide 3 port of entry in Indonesia. First, Jakarta, second, Bali, and third, Batam. For Jakarta, it's quite easy to handle because it's capital of Indonesia. But when we are talking about Bali and Batam, we have to deal with regional government. We have to ensure, that they are ready to receive the repatriation. At the same time, they also faces local COVID-19 cases. So this is quite sensitive issue for regional government. The challenge is how to ensure the readiness of regional government to receive the repatriation, as well as to minimize the imported cases from the repatriation. The flag state, another challenge. During our experience, the role of flag of convenience is quite minimum during the repatriation process. Sorry. Now we talk about the opportunity. Even though we faced tremendous challenges when doing the repatriation, we believe there's an opportunity for us to increase cooperation. First, G2G cooperation. We hope that we can establish good cooperation with regard to the flag state, the port state, and also country of origin, which is Indonesia, during the repatriation process. And then private government cooperation during our effort to repatriate our national. The role of ship owner, the role of manning agencies are critical in this regard. And also social actor, when we receive some information from media, from social media, this is quite helpful for us to know about the situation faced by our national offices. And then cooperation with international organizations. We hope that the international organization like IMO and ILO can provide referral mechanism at international setting, and also that have been said by Mr. Adam Tugio. We hope that the IMO can set up guidance for the abandonment of seafarer. Last but not least, about the lesson learned. This is the last slide from us. About the state responsibility, this is, we are talking about port state, flag state, and also country of origin. How the state can working together to regulate, monitor, and supervise, also, as well as facilitate. And then ensuring the private sector to fulfill their contract obligation and comply to regulation. And then for international organization, as I mentioned before, we hope that international organization can set up referral mechanism, provide advisory roles, and also monitor member countries' compliance with regard to international law. And then corporate liabilities. We hope that the ship owner can fulfill all contractual obligation, follow national regulation and also international standard. And then last but not least, about non-government actor, their role to inform and report incident. This is quite helpful for us because when we receive information from them, we can respond as soon as possible, as well as to facilitate communication between seafarer, ship owner, as well as state government. We have a good cooperation with the organization of seafarer in Indonesia to communicate with not only with the seafarer themselves, but also to the family of the seafarer in Indonesia, because calming down the family in Indonesia when their relative working overseas is also important as part of handling cases smoothly. So thank you very much. I hope we can discuss later. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Yuda. Thank you, Director Yuda, for your presentation. I think you sum it up nicely at the end, at the beginning of your presentation, when you said no country can cope with COVID-19 alone. And I think this drives home the realization that particularly during this pandemic, even as social distancing becomes the norm, international cooperation is more relevant than ever, including in repatriation of the seafarers. And in doing so, you outline several lessons learned, which I think might provide some food for thoughts during the discussion. You also shared your perspective on the roles of each stakeholders, including flag states. And I think I'm happy also to share the experience of the Indonesian Embassy in this regard, that we had very positive experience in working with some flag states like countries like Portugal and Bahama, in a way that they were committed in working together with other stakeholders, and that was very helpful in the embassy's efforts in repatriating the seafarers. I would like now to invite our next speaker, who is Captain Anthony Arif Priyadi. He is the Director for Sea Traffic at the Ministry of Transportation of the Republic of Indonesia. Director, you have the floor.
Check.
Please, Pak.
Ya. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Good morning, participant. Of course, distinguished participant, and of course I cannot speak one by one. Good morning to all of you. Thank you for the time that we choose as the speaker for the topic of repatriation and crew change. Of course, this is quite important for us that based on our experience during spread of the pandemic COVID-19, that we have done some action to have the seafarers, especially for the crew change in our country, Indonesia. Our presentation actually covered the topic of action of Indonesia for the repatriation and crew change. The second things regarding the Indonesian commitment. The third one is progress of the repatriation in Indonesia, and then the fourth one regarding the health protocol in port, and the last one is practical crew change by the industry. Next, please. Yeah, we thanks to the Secretariat General of the IMO, as well as my senior actually, regarding the repatriation and crew change. And of course, quite clear that during the pandemic COVID-19, we see that we found that a lot of seafarers, they have difficulty to back to their home country. And then based on this campaign, I believe that we campaign a lot of this crew change and the repatriation. Then our Indonesian government have take several action regarding the repatriation and crew change. Next slide. That we actually start from the circular letter of the Director General of Sea Transport, number SE 13/2020, regarding the concerning passenger limitation on ship, logistic transport, and port service during the emergency of coronavirus disease disaster management 2020. Then the second one is we revise the circulator, and then this is still on the progress because we intend to add additional port for the repatriation and crew change in Indonesian port. The third one, the activities of repatriation and crew change are arranged and coordinated by all the related minister and institutions: maritime and investment, foreign affairs, health, law and human rights, finance, transportation, Indonesian National Army, and then also the Republic of Indonesia National Police, National Disaster Management Agency, also the task force unit for the COVID-19, and a lot of the agency. Indonesia actually facilitates the crew change need of foreign ships with the special procedure and health protocol that has been established by WHO, coordinate with the ship owner, principal, and or agent, ship agent. Then we also integrate services included the information and pre-ship arrival, debarkation or embarkation, CRQS process, medical examination of COVID-19, place of COVID-19 quarantine or isolation, land transportation, as well as the connecting flight back to the home. And then the third one, regarding the Indonesia commitment on repatriation and crew change for Indonesian and foreign citizen crew. Actually, on the beginning, we only use several ports. For instance, in Tanjung Priok, Jakarta, Benoa, and also port in the Batam area, crossing the Malacca Strait. And at the moment, we still prepare the additional port, become a 16 port and then 2 of them located in the traffic suppression scheme at Strait of Sunda and also Strait of Lombok. And then Indonesia is one of the states that signed the joint ministerial statement of the International Maritime Virtual Summit on Crew Change on Thursday, July 9th, 2020, that highlight the importance to facilitate crew change and repatriation. And then, of course, uh, uh, for this matter, actually, for the Indonesian commitment, actually, we already conduct several times. And maybe if we may present the data of the repatriation, please, slide number 6. Number 6. Next slide. Yeah. Actually, currently we assist 31 of the cruise ship, and then total of the crew repatriated is around 8,000. Start from 26 February 2020. So I believe Indonesia is the first country who conducts or doing the crew repatriation. Next. And according our circulator number 13 2020, this is the actual area for the repatriation crew on the bottom area, Rio Archipelagic, Karimun Jawa, and Tanjung Balai, Batam, around that place. And then next, we may see on this slide, actually the yellow one, actually what we have done so far, and then the red one, the title with the red box, we are in progress to deliver this port to become a port for the crew change. Not only crew change, but also for bunker, provision, and water supply activity. And then the green mark with the title is the additional port that we will establish after the 5 port, Batam, Merah, Tanjung Priok, Benoa, and Makassar. Next. Ladies and gentlemen, for the health protocol in port, actually, in our uh, study, uh, compared to the other country, actually, every country they put the protocol for the crew change and also the repatriation of the crew, as well as in Indonesia that we work together with the COVID-19 task force, who the task force unit is the institution responsible for the handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. So actually, the crew repatriation and crew exchange, based on our experience, yeah, having 8,000 or more the crew, that we don't have any problem or any issue related to that one. So the next, and then practical crew change for the sign on and sign off. Of course, we try to see this one. So actually, as a general, GIQS procedure to be followed. And of course, at the moment, we, with the other ministry, still working on this send-on crew and also send-off crew to be handled in the faster time, deliver to the port and then airport and then back to their home. Next. And then this is sign-on crew to continue next. And then this one is for the sign-on crew. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that our presentation is very short and brief, but in practical terms, we have done several times for the crew repatriation and crew change. So thank you very much for the moderator, and then the time is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak Director. I think you provided some very practical insights, and it was interesting to learn how the repatriation of seafarers are being implemented back home in Indonesia. I would like now to invite our next speaker, Mr. Frederick Kenny, who is the Director of Legal and External Affairs at the International Maritime Organization here in London. Mr. Kenny, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and good morning or good evening to all of you, wherever you may be. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I want to thank all the previous speakers for their presentations. They've been very interesting. I also want to congratulate the Embassy of Indonesia in the UK for setting up this this webinar and having this discussion. I wanted to highlight a couple of points that that Mr. Tugio and the moderator have made. With respect to the crew change crisis that's currently going on globally, I think the moderator mentioned that nobody can do it alone, and that is certainly true. I would actually add to that by saying that this is an all hands on deck evolution. We are not going to solve this crisis unless everyone globally works together. And that includes using all the tools available to us. I also want to congratulate the Indonesian Embassy for their really proactive stance in dealing with crew change issues that have arisen in the UK, and for being so active at the IMO and with our Seafarers Crisis Action Team in trying to resolve these cases. As I said, this is an all hands on deck evolution. I think the embassy has been on the front lines of that, and I congratulate you for that. It's a model for other countries to emulate, I think. And I also think, as a preliminary view, that we have to use all the tools at our disposal to try to solve this crisis. And that includes port state control action when necessary. And I would like to further congratulate the UK for their efforts in bringing the global cruise line cases to a resolution. I agree with Katie Ware that those cases would not have been resolved in the way that they were successfully without the port state control action driving action by the flag state, by the company, by the P&I clubs. So that's an example of where that type of situation can be resolved by using the right tool at the right time. What I want to discuss with you briefly here today is the role and activities of the IMO Seafarer Crisis Action Team, and then talk a little bit about the future in terms of where we see things going. It's important to note that the IMO does not really have an operational arm. Its field operations are very limited. Traditionally, it relates to the Integrated Technical Cooperation Program. But in terms of dealing with individual cases, it has tended to be in the area of oil spill response. The IMO will send teams out to monitor oil spill and advise on oil spill response actions. We're doing that actually right now with the oil spill that is occurring off the coast of Mauritius. And we also have been active in the cases of seafarer abandonment through the joint implementation of the Maritime Labor Convention and its provisions on seafarer abandonment. The IMO has actively worked abandonment cases for the last 5 years, but that's really been about it. The Secretary General realized very early on in the pandemic, as we saw the crew change crisis becoming more and more serious, that we needed to do something, and we did need to become more actively involved at the operational level. So he directed the formation of the Seafarers Crisis Action Team, which I'm honored to lead. And the SCAT really has three primary roles, and I'm going to talk about each one of those and what we're doing in that regard to give you an update. The first role, as I mentioned, was the Secretary General felt that we may need to get more involved in individual cases because we were receiving reports from seafarers of some of the dire situations that they were encountering with respect to conducting crew changes, repatriation, access to medical care, et cetera, and the restrictions that had been raised as a result of the pandemic. And thus far, we've worked more than 250 cases. And what we primarily do is work at the diplomatic level. If it appears that a case actually requires diplomatic intervention, the IMO will, the Seafarers Crisis Action Team will get involved to try to reach a diplomatic resolution in cases that defy resolution in other ways. And that has been successful in a number of cases. It has led to some challenges in other cases, but the primary focus of the SCAT in working on individual cases is to ensure that the countries that need to be involved in the resolution of the case, and in many cases, the ministries within an individual country that need to be involved, we're all talking to each other because cross-communication multilaterally and also domestically is really one of the keys to solving many of the cases that we're seeing. And as I said, we've worked more than 250 cases thus far. That's far less than the ITF has worked, but I think we'll be hearing more about that later. But I can tell you quite honestly, my expectation was that we would get a handle on this situation, it would start to wane, and we would be able to wrap up the activities of the SCAT in fairly short order. Given where we are right now, I actually don't see that happening because this appears to be a continuing situation that will not be fully resolved for quite some time. So we still have work to do, but I think the development of policies and practices and procedures, like we've heard from the speakers here today in terms of what Indonesia is doing, is really critical. And I would encourage you to share your best practices with other countries, particularly the countries that are having difficulty finding a way to allow for crew changes and to overcome some of their internal obstacles to conducting successful crew changes. I think many of the slides here that I've seen here today really show a good model for best practices for making it happen. And of course, the UK has been a leader in that since the beginning. The second area where the SCAT has become very heavily involved is in the development of policies to help facilitate crew changes. A lot of that involves sharing of information. As the IMO website has become one of the better repositories in the world for information regarding how to successfully conduct crew changes, and also information with respect to how shipping should deal with the pandemic. If you go to the IMO website, www.imo.org, and click on the red banner, you will see a trove of information. With respect to crew changes, that primarily focuses on the circular letter series under circular letter 4204. And there are a number of those circulars that address crew changes, probably the most important of which is 4204 Ad 14. Which contains the protocols that were developed by the industry and have been endorsed by the Secretary General to safely conduct crew changes. And I think the previous speakers have shown how Indonesia has implemented those, and the practices and procedures that you are conducting are very consistent with the protocols. The Secretary General is urging all countries to implement those protocols in a consistent way so that we can have a consistent system of crew change and repatriation around the world. We're not there yet. Only about 50 countries have implemented the protocols at this point, and there are a number of countries that still have quite a ways to go that are still not allowing crew changes whatsoever, including repatriating their own nationals, and that is a pretty serious situation. We're seeing cases now. In fact, the SCAT got a report in yesterday. We got a note in from a seafarer who has been at sea continuously for 17 months. And that is an extraordinary period of time without coming ashore. As a former seafarer myself, I can't even imagine that. And so the development of these policies is really important for three reasons. Because when you look at this crisis, it really touches on three main factors. The first one is humanitarian. Of course, the seafarers that have been out there, that have had their contracts extended, they want to go home, and they should not feel as though they're imprisoned on the ships that they're on, and we need to find ways to do that. The Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights at the UN, they actually believe that this is becoming a human rights situation for certain seafarers who are completely prevented from returning to their home countries. So that there's the humanitarian aspect. Then there is the safety aspect. Many of these seafarers that have been on board for well past the expiration of their contracts, they're tired and they're frustrated. Yet they have to continue to work, oftentimes 7 days a week, in a job that can be very challenging and potentially dangerous. And fatigued seafarers tend to be the leading cause of casualties that we see reported to the IMO. And we're very concerned about this from a safety aspect. We need to replace the seafarers that are on board that are tired and want to go home with people who are fresh and ready to work. And those people want to work, and they're frustrated because they can't get to the ships in order to work. And the third concern that we have with this crisis is an economic concern. As a number of the previous speakers have mentioned, the global economy moves with shipping. And you cannot keep seafarers at sea indefinitely. It's simply impossible. And at some point, we are going to, if we do not solve this crisis, we are going to see a slowdown in shipping because there just won't be crews available that are able to safely man the ships and operate them. And we have to confront that and come up with solutions to keep shipping moving, or we will see a follow-on impact. It's very clear that shipping will be doing quite a bit to solve and overcome this pandemic, and also in the aftermath will have a key role in rebuilding the global economy from the effects that have occurred because of the pandemic. So it really is critical that we come up with a solution to solve the crew change issue so that shipping can continue to move safely and efficiently, and while protecting the seafarers and their rights. In terms of policy development, the level of collaboration between the IMO, the other UN specialized agencies, the ILO, the World Health Organization, ICAO, the World Trade Organization, the World Tourism Organization, could go on and on. The level of cooperation and coordination, quite frankly, has been unprecedented, as has been the level of cooperation and coordination between industry and labor. The ICS and the ITF are constantly cooperating and working together. And this is a really good sign, and I hope this will be able to continue on into the future. But as I said, this is an all hands on deck evolution, and this is the kind of cooperation and collaboration that we need. I think it was mentioned that in the case of the global cruise line situation, working with the flag states, working with the port states, working with the nations where the seafarers are from, that kind of cooperation and coordination really must occur in order to reach successful solutions. In terms of policy developments, we're also doing some other things on the softer side. I think Mr. Tugio mentioned the Day of the Seafarer campaign this year, where the hashtag was "Seafarers are key workers," in a drive to get all countries to designate them as key workers. The World Maritime theme next year will be seafarers at the core of shipping's future. We want to continue the focus on seafarers, and we want to continue recognizing them so that globally people all around the world, from whatever walk of life, recognize the importance of seafarers in their daily lives. The third area where the SCAT has been involved is preparing the Secretary General for a series of bilateral meetings that he has been conducting with particularly important countries that are either doing things very well or facing issues with the crew change crisis. He has already had 12 of these. As a matter of fact, he had one this morning. And we have found that that's been a very effective means of communicating, assisting countries in working cross-agency domestically, assisting with working with the other UN agencies so that we can come up with solutions. Quite honestly, most of the countries that we've had the meetings with have wanted to come in with some good news to share, and we think that it's driving actually policy changes in many countries. We had initially thought that this series of meetings would continue only until the beginning of August, but we're actually scheduling them now for September because, as I said, the situation is not going away. And we're going to need to keep up the effort in order to overcome this. What we're seeing is, unfortunately, while we are seeing progress in many states and many countries are making positive changes to their rules and regulations to allow for crew changes to occur, the rate of positive change is not keeping up with the backlog of seafarers that need to be either repatriated or need to get to ships. At the beginning of the crew change crisis, at the beginning of the pandemic, there were approximately 250,000 seafarers, 125,000 that needed to get off ships, 125,000 that needed to get to ships. We're looking at something more like 600,000 right now. So we still have an awful long way to go. And as I said, we are concerned about progress. Now, that's, and we're also, in terms of working bilaterally and multilaterally, we also have been supporting efforts, including the UK summit, which had some very effective statements coming out of it that have been very helpful in our bilaterals. We're working closely with the UN Secretary General because he is heavily engaged. We're encouraging countries, and this may be a takeaway for Indonesia, we are encouraging countries to bring this matter up at the UN General Assembly this fall. The more recognition that seafarers can get, the quicker we will get to a solution. So we would encourage your representatives at the UNGA to bring seafarers to the forefront. In terms of future efforts at the IMO, Mr. Chujio had mentioned the document that the Indonesia and the Philippines had submitted to the legal committee last January, commenting on a proposal by China with respect to guidelines on abandonment of seafarers. During the pandemic, the IMO Council has met twice to establish, primarily to establish procedures for the resumption of the technical work at IMO. The work will begin in September. But one of the outcomes of the council was that each committee should have on their agenda an agenda item that addresses the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on their areas of work within their committee. So I think, for example, the proposal by Indonesia and the Philippines, commenting on the proposal of China, may be looked at by the committee in a broader perspective to see if there's more we need to do as a result of the lessons learned from the pandemic. And I think that's going to occur at every committee in the IMO. And we'll look forward to the proposals that we receive and seeing where they go. I think I'll stop there. Thank you very much for this opportunity to update on the work of the IMO with respect to the pandemic at Seafarers. And again, congratulations for the work that you've been doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Kenny, for your perspective. That was quite a fitting expression to the topic at hand when you said all hands on deck of evolution. And I think one of the examples in putting those words into action was the establishment of the SCAP, or the Seafarer Crisis Action Team, that really outlines the urgency of the seafarer situation, at least from the perspective of relevant organizations such as the IMO. Our last speaker, but definitely not least, is Mr. Fabrizio Barcelona. I hope I pronounced his name correctly, who is the Seafarers and Inland Navigation Coordinator at the ITF, or International Transport Workers Federation. Mr. Fabrizio, you have the floor. Bisa ada orangnya?
Thank you, Riando, and I hope you can hear me well.
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Thank you, and good day to everyone, and thanks to the Republic of Indonesia through the Embassy in London for organizing this webinar. We are used these days to have many webinars or events, but I think that this one is important because we cannot stop to highlight the issue of crew changes. And I mentioned specifically crew changes because crew repatriation is not sufficient to address the issue. In fact, for every seafarer that managed to leave the ship, someone else have to replace him, and that makes things even more complicated today. I think the Seafarers Union and maritime employers and certainly other organizations have not forgotten seafarers because they have been ostracized, treated as if they are the carriers of this terrible disease. We know that they have been denied access to urgent medical assistance. They have been denied the right to return home or join ship, and this even months after the contract have expired. In many cases, they have been denied even the chance to enjoy shore leave or unable to lodge complaint about the worsening living and working condition. We certainly recall that a difficult decision were taken to allow the international instrument that regulates safety and working and living condition to be temporarily amended, and I like to stress temporarily. And this was to avoid ship and seafarers being unable to maintain the global supply chain, which they are, in our opinion, the most important part. And this is a concern because the temporary nature upon which the international instrument were amended, it seemed has become the norm. And I sympathize with what Katie said at the beginning by receiving the criticism for the UK government to take action on the ships, the cruise vessel in the UK. But certainly we are sympathized because we are criticized on a daily basis for trying to represent the issue of the seafarers. Certainly sitting and doing nothing, you will not attract any criticism, but doing the right things as the UK government has done through the MCA certainly can attract some criticism, but we are full support of the wonderful job that they have done, alongside with the support we have received from the Indonesian Embassy, and that this is not the only cases that we receive the same level of support. I think that along with the industry partner, welfare organization, regulatory agencies, the IMO is here today, but also I'd like to mention the ILO and other agencies. The ITF and the affiliates have provided direct assistance to seafarers and their family. We have set up a fund to assist seafarers in immediate need, as well as their family, because we thought that was the right thing to do. Certainly we have our limited resources, but we try to do as much as we could. I'd like to echo what Frederick said about the unprecedented cooperation between industry that at times have a different, different goals, different objectives. They all set that aside and we work together. And I think we have demonstrated proactively creating, for example, very dedicated protocols on how to address all the concern on protection, safe travel, air and port corridor, financial resources, accommodation, and secure identity of seafarers to try to finally have the seafarers able to travel to and from ships. We believe that this protocol that has been endorsed by the IMO and supported by the ILO might not be the final answer, but certainly should provide some kind of assistance to national government to take the best practice or the best example within the protocol and include them in their national regulation. We have seen today interesting presentation what the government of Indonesia is doing. And it is important because along with the Philippines, India, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Russia, and Ukraine, they provide the bulk of the seafarers to the global fleet. And I think that is very important also, and it was mentioned already, the cooperation within government, different agencies to address the issue. Because certainly we don't feel defeated, but certainly we are frustrated because it has been clear that the industry have responded and have made itself available to follow all the regulations that have been imposed. As a result, we have seen, and we're still seeing, extreme difficulties of the application of the requirement the country have to affect crew changes, frustrated because the different agencies don't seem to talk, or at regional level they don't seem to agree on what are the rules that can change from one day to another. Now, we are sympathetic with every country that tries to protect their citizens, but we have moved on since the beginning of this crisis in late February, beginning of March. Now, I think the most abused word after COVID-19 is the new normal. What is the new normal? What the new normal apply? And we see wherever we live that our government starting to put in place mechanisms that preserve the public health, but also resurrect or try to restart economies and social living. This new normal doesn't seem to apply to seafarers for some reason. I think it is quite evident today that it's much easier as a tourist apply online for a visa and visit the United States, visit some country in Europe or elsewhere than it is for the seafarers that is medically checked, and certainly much more than every one of us to apply for a visa to join or leave the ships. What we are concerned, that is at least in Europe, but I think that might be the case in other countries. Now it seems to appear a second peak of the disease, mainly brought not by seafarers, but tourists that have traveled during the summer. And that the highest country now in Europe with the rate of COVID-19, Spain, France, Italy, the UK, and others, seems to again considering a measure to contain the spreading of the contagion. And this will be a terrible situation if that happens and the seafarers are not considered. Seafarers simply want to arrive in a country, jump safely on the plane and go home, and for another seafarers to do the other way around. They don't want to stay in the country. They don't carry, there is no scientific evidence that they are more contagious than anyone on earth. And so I think that we need to start taking into account the situation of the seafarer that has been highlighted already by Frederick, the number are impressive and disturbing. As ITF, with our colleagues in the London team that support seafarers, we receive between 2,000 to 3,000 cases a week. That doesn't mean 2,000 or 3,000 seafarers, because that can be individual seafarers, or it can be 20 seafarers on the ships, or 2,000 if it is a cruise vessel. We have 5,000 Facebook contacts a day highlighting the issue the seafarers are facing. Our inspectors that now are going back visiting ships report of the situation of the seafarers that have been on board well beyond their contractual terms. It was mentioned 17 months, but we have cases of up to 21 months on board. The seafarers profession is require attention and is quite demanding. So it is clear that the increase of marine disasters is just on the corner. And we felt that we have to respond to the latest allegation made by the media on the grounded of Wakashio in the Mauritius, because there was implication from the media that the seafarers on board, at least the master, other two seafarers were on board well beyond their contractual terms. If that was the case, certainly that is the case, but not necessarily is the case for which the ship grounded. But we are starting to believe that we need to do something, and we need to do something quickly, because every regulation has been amended to satisfy the maritime or the shipping industry. No international regulation has been amended to favor the seafarers. We don't ask for any amendment. We just ask to implement what is written in the convention that has been ratified by country. Simply that. And I will stop here, because I think that it will be interesting to have the possibility to receive some feedback from the other participant, and I'm available if there is any question you want me to elaborate further. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fabrizio, for sharing the perspective of the ITF. That was quite interesting on what you said. I think due to time constraint, we have time for one session of question and answer, although I will take my cue from the floor. I will now take 3 questions from the floor. I invite participants to post questions or share their perspectives relevant to the topic at hand. Please feel free to direct the question at any of the speakers, if you want to just share your general observation, that is also fine. You can do it either to the chat box, or you can press the raise hand button. So we have a good number of participants for our event today. Just would like to share with everyone that I think just now we had around 75 participants here in this Zoom room, and we also had another 15 following the event from the YouTube streaming. I think we have a good number of participants to have a good discussion. We haven't had any question yet. If I may, maybe just to kick off the discussion. Oh, yes. Yes, please. Pak Anthony.
Thank you, moderator. Yeah. Additional to our presentation, that we observe in the practical side that yes, some country they already implemented how to repatriate crew during the pandemic COVID-19. But we observe that for some costs related to the assessment of the PCR test or rapid test relating to the COVID-19, the cost is a burden to the seafarers. Some company we observed, actually we found some company done that practical on the repatriation of crew, and then sometimes they also ask the seafarers to pay the accommodation during the quarantine, because as we follow the procedure of the repatriation crew during the pandemic COVID-19, they should stay on the some hotel or some places that waiting for the result of PCR test or rapid test. So it means this one look like we need to concern how to push the company. Yes, we realize that company during this pandemic they lost a lot of the income and so on. But for the reason of the repatriation, actually it's quite difficult if the seafarers need to pay for the additional expenses due to the test of the COVID-19 free of COVID-19, and also for the accommodation cost. We need to solve this problem, and of course we cannot do the control this one 100%, that we cannot control this one, because this one sometimes the crew explain this thing, tell to us after they back home, and then they just told us that additional cost is paid by them, not by the company. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pak Director. So maybe while we're waiting for the participants to ask questions, just to kick off the discussion, I would just like to pose a question to our speakers from the IMO and the ITF. Throughout our discussion, we have been using the term blanket seafarers to talk about the topic today. Of course, there are different types of seafarers. We have seafarers on board merchant vessels, for example. We have them on fishing vessels, also cruise vessels. And we appreciate that each type of this vessel, they have their own characteristic, maybe industry rules, and also specific challenges. Now, I would like to hear the perspective of the speakers, or distinguished speakers from the IMO and ITF on cases involving fishing vessels. We understand that they face challenges, even potential threats from trans-organized crime aspects. And maybe we could hear your opinion on specific challenges related to this kind of vessels, and how international cooperation between IMO and other stakeholders with countries could tackle this problem head on.
Okay, I'll go first. Thanks. First, in answer to your more general question, the IMO is, in terms of who we're considering to be seafarers with respect to the crew change crisis, we are using the definition that's in the Maritime Labor Convention. And that is a very broad definition, but I think it captures most of the people who are stranded at sea or unable to get to work. Now, with respect to fishers themselves, the IMO is less involved in the regulation of fishing vessels, although we certainly would like to see the Torremolinos Convention and the Cape Town Agreement of 2012 enter into force, and we have been making particular efforts to try to get those instruments into force. as soon as possible. So our emphasis, because we do not regulate them as much, may have been more on seafarers on larger merchant vessels. But that does not in any way minimize the issues that fishers are facing, because they are seeing exactly the same issues that others are in terms of, and in some cases, even more significant issues in terms of the ability to conduct crew changes. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Fabrizio?
Yeah, thank you. And probably I should have mentioned in my opening statement, and I was pleased that the UK government and representative from the Indonesia mentioned fishers. Yes, under normal circumstances, even before the COVID-19, the situation on the fishing vessel is much more complicated, mainly because vast majority of a fishing vessel fish outside ports. They are refueled or reprovisioned by mothership. They go at sea, and we are very concerned of the situation on board fishing vessel, and we're very pleased. Now, don't quote me, but I think 2-3 years ago, when the proactive step that the Indonesian government took, they are refueled or provisioned by mothership vessel and ship. We are very concerned of the situation on board the fishing coast out at sea, having seafarers, fishers on board were not under any rights and seized the vessel. Step the Indonesian government took against the illegal fishing vessel by taking those ships out of sea, having on board were not, and so by the ITF, some of my colleagues quite closely. But yes, the fact that most of the fishing vessels are not coming to port make the issue of repatriation even more dramatic. But not only repatriation, I think we have solved a number of cases of injured seafarers that were kept on board for quite some time, although they were injured and needed medical attention, until such time that they were able to visit a medical facility where they've been cured.
Mr. Fabrizio, are you still there?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, we lost you for a moment there.
No, I concluded. I was just saying the difficulties we have.
Okay. Thank you very much. I just received a question from one of the participants, and I would now pose it to the floor. It's directed at Director Judah Nugraha. Mm-hmm. And the question is if Director Judah could please elaborate on interagency coordination at the domestic level in Indonesia. Perhaps there is lessons learned or best practice that can be shared with others related to interagency coordination.
Thank you. Thank you, moderator. Thank you, Mr. Ando, and thank you for Pak Rangga for the question. The question is if some ship owner can pay their seafarer for 4 months, this led to the seafarer don't want to continue working. And now the seafarer demanding to be repatriated. In this case, what is the responsibility of the manning agency? So according to our law and regulation, the role of state as the last resort. So first, we would the government and also, of course, Indonesian mission overseas will seek responsibility of the owner, and also, of course, the manning agency here in Indonesia. So that's the first thing that we have to do. Is like I presented earlier that we would like to seek responsibility of the ship owner and also the manning agency. And when the situation get worsening, and there is a immediate need for the Indonesian seafarer to be repatriated soon to Indonesia, then the ship owner and also the manning agency fail to fulfill their responsibility, then the state will present to take over the cost. But still, in this regard, we will ask the responsibility first from the ship owner. And with regard to the responsibility of the ship owner to pay the cost, of course, the salary, of course, is still the responsibility for the ship owner. So we will coordinate relevant ministry. In this regard is a Ministry of Transportation and also Ministry of Manpower in Indonesia to continue to ask the responsibility of the ship owner to fulfill their responsibility to pay the salary of the ship owner. This is different with the repatriation. If the repatriation is needed to be done quickly, then we, Ministry of Affairs, will do our best to repatriate them as soon as possible to Indonesia. But the pending case for the salary, we will coordinate with the relevant ministry in Indonesia. In this case is Ministry of Transportation, Ministry of Manpower, and also the agencies, the Indonesian agencies for protection of Indonesian migrant workers. I hope that answered the question. Thank you.
I would like now to open the floor again for further questions from the participants. Kind information of the participant, I would just like to share some updates from the perspective of Indonesian Embassy. We heard some speakers mention about an accident involving the Vasco da Gama cruise, and I'm happy to share with you that he is now recovering. I think he's fully recovered and he's ready to go back to Indonesia, which is very good news. And also just this morning, the embassy saw off the repatriation of around 18 crews on board the Vasco da Gama, which is another piece of good news. And this shows us that despite the challenges, there is always a room for cooperation, which will lead to the successful repatriation of these seafarers. And also a very important note for all of these passengers, their salary were paid in full. So this is also thanks to the excellent coordination involving stakeholders such as the IMO, ITF, and any other stakeholders. So I don't see any further questions. Seeing that it's almost 1, may I now invite the Charge d'Affaires, Pak Adam Tugio, to deliver the closing remarks to our webinar today. Silakan, Pak.
Well, once again, thank you very much, Ando. And I think once again, on behalf of the Embassy of Indonesia, I would like to extend our gratitude to all panelists, especially Madam Kathy Wire, Frederick Kenny, and Fabricio Barcelona, who are kindly enough to share their perspective on the issues that we are facing, on to give maximum protections to the seafarer as the key worker. And also our appreciation goes to Pak Yuda Nugraha and Captain Anthony Aripriadi, panelists from Jakarta, who also stay throughout the course of discussions to share the best practices. I think we are more than happy to organize another rounds of consultations if there is a request from other participants, and also working together with the UK port authorities and IMO, including ITF, certainly give a benefit for us, and I think we will continue to work together to address this challenge. And I think there are some issues that are still on the pipeline in the IMO. While we are closing to the September, usually starting September, there will be discussions on UN resolutions on law of the seas. And I think I would like also to echo one of the suggestions made by Frederick in raising the awareness of the issues of protection of the seafarer toward the annual omnibus resolutions of the UN General Assembly resolution. So once again, I thank you so very much for the contributions of all panelists, and also all participants, all attendees who are attending these webinar sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Adam. And with those closing words, thank you everyone for joining us today. The webinar event is now concluded. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak Ando. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All
Thank you,
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.